Hello, everybody. Firstly, thank you for lasting out to the last session of the last day. I'm always impressed that there's anyone left. Certainly, my brain is aching after the intense discussions, the amazing presentations, and so forth that I've witnessed and participated in these last 3 days. So sometimes my internet dies, and usually this is a source of huge frustration. But every once in a while, I actually realize this is a time for me to stop and think. And I feel coming to a conference is a bit like that. You get that moment to be away from your everyday work, to participate in discussions, to listen to amazing talks, to just sort of take a break from what you're doing and actually think a bit more widely. And certainly, I've heard some amazing conversations and discussions and talks. Unfortunately, I've had to miss a lot of the good sessions because I've been dragged by the account managers to talk to some customers, and that's been amazing. But I wish I'd been in more of the sessions because the ones I've been in have been incredible. I mean, obviously Tim O'Reilly was very inspiring. I think it was really nice to see David Gray talking about the connected company and how closely that tied into Sanjeeva's original talk on how we work as a company and how we are different from the ordinary middleware organization, how we're trying to be a different organization. And I think it really resonated listening to Dave. And I think that Tim's talk about how we can actually change the world for the better and the list of kind of important things we should be doing with this technology and not just 10 different laundry companies was very inspiring. Jeffrey Hammond's talk about the systems of automation and the ways people are building things, I think that you'll see a lot of sync up with what we've been talking about all through the conference and the way we're going. And and this panel discussion was fantastic. So we've had a set of discussions, but even sessions. I mean, I attended a fantastic session on the ESB, amazing session for Pacific Controls on how they're building out a system that manages every part of, say, the new Dubai airport. That's something like 14,000 acres, and Farm Credit of Nebraska talking about how they've built a mobile app to help farmers. I mean, brilliant stuff. So all of these have been very inspiring. But what I'd like to talk about today is how do you connect the world? So if you hear these inspiring things and you see this technology, sometimes it's a bit like, well, how do I take those first steps? How do I actually make this happen? And we've heard quite a lot about that today. For example, in the connected company talk, there was a lot of talk about how to take those first steps and create a connected company out of an existing company. I think Prakash's mention about saying, don't build a platform, build a real use case that happens to sneak a platform in, that happens to demonstrate the platform was very, very powerful. I think that's kind of what I'm going to try and talk about today is how to take milestone steps to build a connected world. So there's this famous thing, I don't know if it's true or not, but there's this famous idea that there's a Chinese insult, a curse upon you. May you live in interesting times. And we live in one of the most interesting times in technology. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, the pace of change and what people are doing with technology. And I love it. I think it's fantastic, and there's obviously a huge appetite amongst this audience for it because otherwise you wouldn't be here. And the world is really truly becoming connected, and this looks like a beautiful graphic drawn by one of our graphic design team. This is actually a genuine map of Facebook connections, which has been auto-generated, and it shows how in a few short years, the world has truly become a connected place. And what we're doing here is, as Sanjeeva said, we're connecting billions of people, billions of devices, and millions of apps. I don't know if there's 1 million or 100 million apps. No one really knows. But I do know that I repeatedly talk to, forget the App Store, I repeatedly talk to large enterprises that say they have 1,000 apps, 2,000 apps, 10,000 apps. One company I talked to had 500 apps they needed to rewrite just for health and safety. So, think how many apps they have in all. If they're health and safety apps, there are 500 of them. So these things need to be connected. They need to be interfaced. And it's not just the people to the people. It's the people to the devices and so forth. It's every which way. And so let's just have a kind of a brief history of the connected world. We started out with batch file transfer. Who still has some batch file transfer in their organization? Yes. So people talk about the dinosaurs of the computing world. The dinosaurs died out. These are like the cockroaches that are ineradicable. You cannot get rid of them, unfortunately. And batch file transfer is very much one of those. And then I kind of I started out in this world in the EAI world. Who else was there with me in the EAI world? Yes, quite a bunch of you. And that I think that, that was all about internal communications and trying to bridge things. But I think this is a pivotal moment. And there's some fight, there's some, if you look at the history, there's some argument about whether it's really Salesforce or eBay who first did the APIs to the external world. But whether it was, which of them it was, in late 90s, early 2000s, people started coming out with these externally available developer APIs. And there's a huge shift. I mean, we had B2B, but this is something that anyone could come along and sign up to and start to use. And as I'm sure you've heard, there are now 6 billion requests a day against eBay's APIs, all going through WSO2's runtime. 6 billion is a very hard number to get your head around. That's 4 million a minute. I know customers who think 4 million a day is a big ask. That's 4 million a minute. That's 70,000 every second. And that's the average. The peak load is 2 to 4 times higher than that. That's a really incredible amount of shift. And what's really interesting for eBay is that when we started 5 years ago, this was 20% of their total traffic. It's now more than half of their total traffic, which is the huge shift in the way that organizations are interfacing and the world of APIs. So this connection is really taking over the world. And we've all heard of connected car. T-Systems came along to our European conference last year and talked about how they've built a connected car platform on WSO2. It's being used by Mercedes-Benz. They're taking it out to other providers. What I think is really interesting about connected car is it's not just, changing our experience of a car. It's actually changing the complete car industry. So the car industry before, you bought a car from a dealer, which is fundamentally a franchise operation. Now, and you really never had a connection with the car manufacturer unless there was something really bad went wrong and it was under warranty. Now, the car manufacturer has a direct connection to you through this connected car. And it's changing the way they're thinking about their business. It's changing it's creating an ecosystem of people who can provide an app into your car. And of course, it's creating masses of big data that could be used by Mercedes-Benz and the car manufacturer to change the way they design cars, the way they sell cars, the experience entirely. So it's really going to completely alter that. This one of our biggest, most established industries, and I think that's amazing. And Uber is attacking it from a completely different angle. What we heard about, I was going to try not to talk about Uber, but I think this is going to change the car industry in a very different way as well. Connected home. So this is a project some guys I know in Germany have done based on OSGI, based on Java, about creating an open platform for connected home. It's called OpenHAB, and and it's part of the Eclipse Foundation. Connected health. This is a chart from another project done by Deutsche Telekom, putting a monitor onto people and knowing when elderly people fall over so they can instantly call the emergency services, also using WSO2's platform. Of course, we've heard from Jim and Boeing about it's not really connected plane as much as it's connected supply chain. But I think it's really interesting that this is, these intersect. Connected government, we had the Dubai government talking about how they're using our identity server here this week. And not all of these are IoT devices. Some of these things are just simply using web and mobile. Out of those 10 billion connected devices, about 4 billion of them are smartphones, or probably not 4 billion, probably 2 billion of them. But fundamentally, this is about trying to connect the people to the applications, to the devices, to the data, to the sensors, to the actuators. So this is not all about IoT. It's certainly not a message I'm trying to get with this connected world. I think you can have a connected world that isn't involving any kind of IoT sensor apart from your phone, or even just connecting people through browsers. But I do think that the sensors and the IoT are going to change this massively, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Trimble, just heard Prakash saying they have a sensor they can put by the plant, by the individual plant, that is going to measure aspects of that plant. Prakash has told me that there's a study that says that if you water a plant precisely through its lifetime, you get a 20% bigger yield. And so his aim is to be able to water that plant precisely. He hasn't been to England, where unfortunately we don't have any control over it, and it just rains and rains on the plant without any ability. If he can create a little connected umbrella, then maybe he can do this. And another project that Trimble involved in is with Hilti Tools, who are making smart tools, connected jackhammer, for example. We have some friends at Yenlo. Some of the guys in Yenlo, Germany, have been involved in connected cow. There's actually several connected cow projects. One of them is actually measuring when the cow is on heat, so the farmer doesn't have to go out and check his herd individually. Probably better shut up about that right now. So, okay, enough already, we get it. Yes, the world is becoming connected. So the interesting question is why? Why is it happening, and I guess why now? What is it that's causing the people in this audience, everybody to start doing this? And this is a chart I've shown multiple times before, and I stole from one of my customers. He stole it from a consultancy called A.T. Kearney. And it's really talking about one of the major shifts in the industry, which is a shift from conglomerates to value webs, to connected organizations, what I call ecosystems. And this is really driven by the cost of doing business between organizations. So that black line is tracing the cost. And this chart is actually quite old now. It doesn't include APIs on it. You can imagine that there'd be a blob right there with the word APIs on it if they did a newer version of this chart. But this is what is happening, is one of the drivers. Another driver, there's this famous article in the Wall Street Journal by Mark Andreessen called "Software is Eating the World." And if you haven't read it, I recommend you do. I think it's a little aggressive, and I think it's personally, it's not the metaphor I want, that software is eating the world. And since 2011, I think people would have to say that, internet-connected hardware is eating the world as well. So it's not just software, but there is some real truth behind this. And I think some of it is about global scale computing. The computing that it takes to put a sensor and deal with the data from a sensor by every single plant in a farm is massive. And that just didn't exist before. The computing power that it takes to power Facebook, to power eBay, to power these systems is incredible. And the fact that it can be spun up in the cloud and virtualized is what's enabling that. I think the low cost of hardware, of course, is driving that. And of course, big data is a huge, a circular, sort of a virtuous circle driving the connected world, which is that the more data collect, the more value you get out of the data. The more you want to collect data, the more you dig deeper and deeper into that data. And I think virtualization is a real key to this. And when I talk about virtualization, I don't just mean virtual machines, VMware. I have a much wider concept of virtualization. So, for example, of course, virtualizing machines into clouds is an important part. But virtualizing deployment and applications into a platform as a service is another aspect of virtualization I think is very important. I see service-oriented architecture and APIs as being the virtualization of function. That's fundamentally what APIs are about. And you know, Dave talked about this very clearly with the idea of a pod, where you virtualize that capability into a different group or into something that you don't have to worry about. And that's very, very important. And finally, we've again and again seen the use of our enterprise store and the store concept as a virtualization of things that were considered, frankly, quite boring. You know, governance and registries and repositories are quite tedious. And enterprise stores and app stores and social engagement and ratings and feedback and forums are all actually really interesting, exciting things. So that's a virtualization that's getting people really excited. And this gives us all these capabilities: automation, control, flexibility, monitoring, agility, subscription, and visibility. So this is one of the things I think is driving this connected world, is virtualization. And so we've done some work on what are the characteristics of a connected business. And I could spend a lot of time talking about this, and I think it is interesting and maybe a subject for a different talk. But it's not, I like to kind of finish WSO2Con a sort of call to action, and I think this is a little bit theoretical for that. But if you can think about how you can make your business viral, how you can create a generative business like the App Store, how can you apply context and contextual information to improve your customers' uses, to improve your business. If you can think about how you can virtualize infrastructure, platform, services to create a new offering to free your business from its bonds. If you can think about how big data can change your value proposition, how you can start to get value out of that data. If you can be more agile and think, well, what does that do for my organization? And we heard Jeffrey talk about the agility required for systems of engagement. If you can think about real time and how real-time processing of this sensor data, of your business data, of what's happening is going to change your organization and change your business model. If you can think about APIs and ecosystems and how they can enhance your organization, and if you can think about what would happen if your business could scale infinitely. It doesn't have to scale infinitely now, but if it could, if you had the ability to say, right, if it grows by twice, I can handle that. If it grows by 4 times, I can handle that. If it grows by 100 times, I can handle that. So all of these things are characteristics of businesses, and there are many of you out here that have one or more or many of these characteristics in what you're doing. And they, I think, are really interesting and really thought-provoking. So that's important, but how do you get there? You know, what is it you're going to do that's going to get you to be a connected business and to help you connect the world and take advantage of this? Well, I'm a big, big believer in milestone plans. And, what's a milestone plan? Well, obviously it's a set of milestones. That's the obvious bit. But I think there are some other aspects that are important to take notice of. And one of them is that each milestone has to be self-contained and useful. So a milestone in our world is something that is almost a release of the product. It hasn't gone through the final QA, but it has passed all of the automated tests. And basically, the aim is that me, as the dumb and rapidly becoming unskilled CTO, can download this and try it out and do a demo and play with it and see this function. So that's very important. And what's a milestone in your world? Well, it should be the similar thing. It should be something that people can actually make use of. It should be something that is real and not just a POC or a sort of, yes, it worked at one moment in time. It's very important that it works ongoing. And milestone is also a really important point for course correction and review. So that at the end of a milestone, you can look back and you can say, well, was this the right milestone? Did we do what we wanted to? Did we get some value out of this? Do we need to change direction now? And the milestones I'm talking about, they're not always independent, but they can be independent. And I think that's very important. The more you can loosely couple those milestones from each other, the more you get into what Dave was talking about of the flexibility, the ability to move quicker, to be more agile. And I quite often, we quite often function box milestones. We say we want a milestone that just does this small amount of function. But you can also time box milestones. You can say, this is, we're going to work on this until December 1st and then see where we get to. I think you have to sometimes mix the two. You sometimes need to choose one or the other. So I've gone backwards, sorry. So what's a milestone plan for a connected world? Well, these are not in order, but there are obviously some things that are better to do earlier. And one of them is still to improve integration and service-oriented architecture, to get that right. I think that is a fundamental basis for a good connected world strategy. Of course, it's not, you can hide some of that. You can get around it. There are lots of people who are doing things with kind of frankly quite ugly back-end integration. But the better you can improve your integration and SOA, the easier this will be. And then once you've done that, or maybe not, maybe before, exposing and monitoring APIs is absolutely essential. And I think Jin put that really clearly. He doesn't know where the connected world is going to take fidelity, but he knows that if he's got the right APIs, he's going to be ready for it. And I think that's really key. Paths and virtualization, I think, are a really, really important part of this. I again and again hear stories of how people are taking the legacy of their world and virtualizing it into a platform as a service, and how that is creating the opportunities to do new business models, to scale differently, to act differently, to be more agile. And I think that's really key. That, to me, is the loose coupling in the vertical dimension. So I always have seen this as service-oriented architecture as loose coupling in the horizontal dimension between different functions. But PaaS is about loose coupling and decoupling between your applications and your function and the underlying infrastructure. And that, I think, is really vital. And Jeffrey gave lots of examples of how people are building these shards that can be deployed in a VM and scaled out in HADR environments and take very simple function that you would say, oh, it's PHP, oh, it's Python, but actually create massively scalable systems. And that, to me, is all about virtualization and PaaS. Enterprise DevOps, I think, is something that is a real enabler for the connected world. You need to be able to move with agility, and you need to be able to get stuff into production effectively. And enterprise DevOps is key to that. And then once you have those, I think reaching out and creating an ecosystem, and Jim is I think, and what you've talked about with Boeing is an amazing example of this, is absolutely key to say, we're going to build an app store, we're going to build an ecosystem, we're going to create a model where other people can participate. And finally, I think that we're beginning to see that it's very, very important to have contextual, mobile, and IoT environments and capabilities. So these connected moments, these mobile moments, these contextual moments where we use this information and this capability to do more. And of course, that brings in big data, and especially real-time big data analysis. So I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit of time, and that's basically my kind of milestone plan. My call to action to you is, each of these individually is achievable. Each of these individually can then have a sub-milestone plan of how you get there. You don't have to do all of these, but these are steps that you can take and a sort of menu of things you can do to say, well, yes, I can take on what Boeing has done and do some of that. I can take on what Trimble has done and do some of that. I can take on what Pacific Controls is doing and do some of that. And these, I think, are really, really key to going away from this conference with something real and some action that is going to get further. And obviously, I'd love you to do it with WSO2, but if you went and did this with Oracle or IBM or TIBCO, I would think we'd still won something. We'd have still influenced you to do something good. Obviously, you're going to struggle harder and longer, but So one of the things I think is really important is that there's a connected platform, and that we have built a single, unified, lean platform that does all this. And I was really, there were two things in that I heard yesterday and today that I think were really interesting. One was Tim O'Reilly quoting this quote, "No undifferentiated heavy lifting." So what does that mean? That means, do the hard things that matter, that differentiate me from my competitors, but don't do stuff that doesn't give me differentiation. And that's really what our platform is aiming to do here. It's aiming to give you a lot of heavy lifting that is not core to your business. It's something that you need to do to be a connected business, to get out there, but it's not something that is core to your business. And this is where our differentiated heavy lifting is. This is what we aim to do differently. We aim to create a platform that differentiates us so that you can then use it to differentiate yourself in some other way. And coming to Dave, I think of this as the platform for your pod or your pods. This is the capability that enables you to build your function and your capabilities and your differentiation that creates a connected world and a connected business. So obviously, there's a whole bunch of things you can do to start integrating better. I've seen a huge shift in the industry to RESTful integration. I still see quite a lot of people using SOAP, and I think the right thing to do is to be intelligent about this. I'm completely, people will know me, I'm not a hardliner on things. I don't have a sort of religious belief in REST, and I don't have a religious belief in SOAP. I think there are good uses. So I think using things intelligently and appropriately is important. But I do see that IoT and mobile have really driven a very strong usage of JSON. And I think that's very important. And we're going to see new protocols in here, like MQTT, for using JSON as the payload for different reasons. And we're also going to see binary protocols and protobuf, and we saw a lot of Thrift. We use Thrift very heavily. Jeffrey had a lot of other examples of people using Thrift, because when you're, for instance, in an IoT world, bandwidth is key. If you're sending data over a GPRS link, you want to get it down. We heard yesterday the target of 1 meg per device per month from Pacific Controls. which is a pretty low target if you think about this device is spitting out sensor data every second or every minute. You need to very compact protocols, and the bandwidth is pretty much equated to the power usage as well. So if you're in a sensor environment, you probably want low power. Back in the middle of your organization, and forgetting about the IT for a minute, don't put up with average service reuse of 1.02. You know, this I have seen so many times, unfortunately. I've seen customers who have declared service-oriented architecture victory because, you know, developer A has created a service, and then usually their mate or themselves have then consumed that service. And they said, yay, we've done SOA, and the average reuse of that service is 1. Actually, in many cases, it's actually less than 1. Because some services aren't even used. And I think iteration and iterate again is really important here. The ability to be flexible, and that of course implies governance and versioning and all of those things. And of course, there's you know, I think it's Conway's law that says that the organization, the technology forms around the organization. You know, if you have, what was the famous thing? You know, we got a 3-pass compiler because we had 3 different groups building it. So I think this is really important, is don't let the organization dictate the structure of the SOA. I think the big enhancement in my life and in my customers' life around SOA and integration has been API management. And I honestly have to admit that when I first started talking about SOA and integration and service-oriented architecture as a plan, back when I was at IBM and in the early days of WSO2, I got it wrong. And we were very naive. The very organizations who needed this were, unfortunately, the organizations least able to take it on board, because we made a fundamental assumption that everybody in the organization was going to do what was the best for the organization. And that sounds really cynical of me to say that's wrong. But it's not about cynicism. It's actually about, if you are in IBM, for example, and you're in one division, how do you know what is the best for the organization? You don't. You know what's the best for your division, your department, because that's the environment you operate in. So assuming that we are working with a friendly, helpful organization and everybody's going to be jolly, happy friends together in a nice sort of hippie vision is not effective. And so using API management to treat the rest of your company with, you know, as much, you know, the same way you would treat someone outside the company is actually really effective. And we heard of how Trimble organized internal hackathons. Well, that's what you do. You know, when you put out an API, you organize a hackathon, you put on food and drink, you offer prizes, you get people in, and they sit there and you give a prize for the best app. Well, that's what you need to do internally as well. So it's not just about the API management technology, it's all about the whole experience, the social rating, the sharing, getting people to tweet about it or yammer about it internally, getting people to put really good documentation, really great ease of use around their APIs, great information about how people are using them, about how the SLAs and the uptime, all the kind of things you need with an external API. So use this opportunity to cut down the SOA to what's needed outside your division. A constrained API store will actually, I think, improve creativity. But don't just use this for external APIs, use this internally as well. So in 2005, Sanjeev and I had a vision that, you know, computing was going to be distributed and service-oriented. And I think that vision has fundamentally come true. I think there's very little doubt about it. I mean, it didn't quite happen exactly how we imagined it. You know, lots of things are cooler and different and fun. You know, JSON RESTful interfaces were not something in our vision and roadmap there. But if you look across the world at how big high-volume websites, high-volume systems are built, every single one of them is service-oriented. And every effective new system is fundamentally service-oriented. And I think I'm willing to put my hand on a new prediction that in 5 years' time, every new application, and a lot of old ones, are going to be virtualized in a PaaS environment. And I think that is happening incredibly rapidly. Last year, I had a 7-year time frame. I've actually reduced it in the last year. And we've done a lot of work on this, and Lakmal's been talking and demoing what we've done in Stratos, and I think this is really exciting, the work around containerization. This is still a milestone release, but what this is all about is much, much better experience for developers and a lot of benefits to people. So, for example, we heard Jeffrey talk about microservices, and Docker is very effective for microservices. If you have Amazon, say, as your deployment environment and you want to deploy microservices, then you're going to be paying a lot because they're going to say, hey, another VM, another VM, another VM. You don't want to do that. So what Docker allows you to do, and what Stratos allows you to do, is to set up a few Amazon instances and then stuff lots and lots of isolated Docker instances within those that give you the microservices. Gives you lightweight tenant isolation for things like PHP and Ruby and Python that don't have it don't have a VM, don't have it in the runtime. Gives you predictive and almost instant scaling. So Lakmal's got a fantastic demo of, you put the thing on the JMeter load up, and suddenly you've got 8 new instances handling that load. In an Amazon environment, you're kind of like, let's just go put the kettle on while it starts up a new server. So this is changing the flexibility of this architecture. And the Docker model gives, I think, really importantly, an open repository of images, which are going to become cartridges in our world. And that's going to give a generative model, a viral model for creating and managing cartridges. And I think that's really important. And that takes me into DevOps and enterprise DevOps. And if you haven't seen what we've done around App Factory and around automating the life cycle of development, you really need to, because this, I think, is one of the most exciting things we've done in a number of years. And I think this is how you build in the agility that you need for a connected world, and as we heard, the systems of engagement. And this is real. This is here today. This can be used right away. And then the app manager and the enterprise store create an environment to consume, to govern, and to distribute this stuff. And I think this is really important. And you get this virtuous circle where you build an ecosystem where a partner registers, they get an environment, they subscribe and use apps and APIs, they build new things, they deploy them, and then that adds into that ecosystem. And that store, I think, is a really key part of it. Of course, App Factory is another part of that. And the two together really build this. I think this is an amazing model. And I stole something from Dave here. The platform is not just for your own pods. That's what an ecosystem is all about. It's kind of, I think Jeff Bezos put it more eloquently in this quote, but I think it's the same idea, that invention is cool, but if you create a platform for the invention of others, for their creativity, then you start to see amazing things. And I think that's a really inspiring thought, and I know what a lot of you are doing in what you've talked about at this conference. And of course, we've heard a lot about IoT, connected devices, mobile. I gave a talk yesterday on how we're expanding our device management to support connected devices. And I think that's very important, but I think one of the really important things is the shift in the architecture this is bringing. In the web architecture, you have a very pull-based model. You might have 10 to 100,000 connections on a really highly used server. You have a lot of human interaction. In a device-connected world, power becomes important. You might have 100,000 or a million or 10 million connections coming into a server. Most importantly, you get this autonomic model, and this is what Jeffrey called systems of automation, where you need the system to react on its own to data. I've seen a lot of articles talking about sensors, and the IT is a cloud of sensors, but to me, the actuators are just important. The change in the world that happens out of this and happens autonomically is where the real excitement is going to happen, and that is important. And that's where the contextual and real-time things come in. And if you didn't see this talk on, for instance, how we used our CEP server to analyze a football match in real time and understand what was happening at a much deeper level, I think it's worth catching that on the video and the replay, because this is really exciting, what we can do with our event processor. So the future's coming, but what I'm trying to say here is that this is not, this is not a pipe dream. This is not a sort of a mad vision for the next 10 years. This is things that you can do, you can start doing today, and many of you are already doing them, and that's what's so exciting is this. And one of the things that's most exciting has been the conversations I've heard between different participants from different companies talking about how, some of you are doing contextual stuff, some of you are doing IoT stuff, some of you are doing ecosystem stuff, some of you are doing API stuff, others are doing mobile, and that interplay between people has been amazing. So to sum up how to get there, formulate the vision, create a realistic milestone plan of things. Of course, Devika wants me to say book a quick start process to help you with your first milestone. But use those milestones for course correction. So don't just, this is not a monolithic plan. This is an ongoing iterative process. And fundamentally take the first step. I think that's the most important thing here, is that this is achievable. This is exciting. I think we do live in exciting times. So I hope this conference has been an opportunity for you to take a step back, to hear some amazing inspirational discussions, projects, thought processes, and for you to go away refreshed and invigorated. So thank you very much. Do we have time for 2 questions? Yeah, go for it. I'm slightly over, but I think we're okay. What have I done? It's the end of a long day, so you may all be dead, but I can't see it. I'm going to do what Rebecca did and just come down here so I can see people. That's better. If you don't ask questions, there's just going to be some kind of Geethika thing going on. So,
Paul, would you agree that API management may be more important than standards in getting towards a connected world vision?
I think that's fundamentally been proven in the market. I mean, I love standards. I've spent many hours of my life developing and participating in standards processes, which is very frustrating and painful. It's akin to herding cats. But the reality is that, yes, you look at APIs, I mean, without incurring the wrath of my friends from the telco industry, you look at one API and then you look at Twilio, and Twilio is winning the battle at the moment, and one API is a standard and Twilio is just a company. So yeah, I think at this point in time APIs are winning, and I think the thing that's changed, I think standards are going to be really important in IoT devices, and I think there's a real need to solve that. But the one thing that's changed in the web world is how easy it is to build stuff with an API. You know, 10 years ago, we were desperately worried about HL7 and fix and standards because it was hard to write stuff to use these standards. Now it's like 2 minutes to create a curl command line to do a JSON or something. It's so quick and easy. I think developers have stopped worrying quite so much about standards. I think IoT is going to change that because we're going to embed it into this device. And this device is, unless, you know, the classic example is, you know, I think I've seen the first of these, which is there's a nice company in London called Little Printer. They made a cute little IoT device. It's like a little thermal printer paper device. You put it at home and you're away from home and you send your wife a cute little thing and it prints out. She gets home and there's a nice little printout. It's unfortunately going to be renamed Little Brick because they went out of business, and as of January, there is no cloud service and your device is now dead and useless. And that is going to drive standards, I think, or it needs to, because that's not an API world where I can go and reprogram my website to use a different API provider. This is a physical device that is dead. So I think standards have going to need a resurgence. But at the moment, in this very point in time, APIs are a different matter. So, yeah. Any other questions? I'll come down here, I can really see. It's very, very bright up there. All right, I think that's probably it then. Certainly, thank you very much again.